Hey guys, Kent Davis here. Today I'm going to talk to you about what you need to be watching out for when you are purchasing real estate in Panama. So I've been at this for about, 17 years, I guess. I don't know. I lost count. 2007. Maybe that's more like 15. But anyway, bought and sold a lot of properties with clients. So here's what I've found, and here's what you need to keep an eye out for. Number one, if you're looking at buying pre-construction, great, could be a potentially nice way to build some equity. However, time is the first thing that you need to be very sensitive about because number one, generally these contracts are going to be written very much in the developer's favor, and sometimes it's almost impossible to get them to change it. The contract, that is. If you can get them to adjust the contract slightly, here's what you want to do. You want to time your payments to construction benchmarks versus, 6 months after I sign the lease or the promise purchase agreement, 12 months after I sign, 16 months after I sign. Why? Well, we've got a situation, for example, where a Tower 1, I'll tell you which building, it's the U Tower. So Tower 1 of, it's actually Wanders now. So Tower 1 of Wanders was planned to be built and delivered right around the pandemic. Okay, cool. They get a pass. They ended up delivering a couple of years later, like 2022. Okay. Fair. Pandemic stopped everything in Panama, froze up a little bit of bank funds, obviously no building. Great. However, the second tower, which was supposed to be done around the same time, hasn't even started yet. And guess what? They're not issuing any refunds yet. Why? Because their contract is very open-ended. Now, we knew that getting into it based on the fact that the foundation was already going. We saw a little bit less risk, but hey, still risky, especially in Panama where contracts are written to the developer's favor. So speaking of developers, you also need to be wary of little details. For example, here in Panama, they do not deliver properties generally with air conditioning, lights, appliances, curtains, usually even chrome fixtures in the bathrooms and stuff like that. So, gee whiz, there's another $10,000 to $30,000 I wasn't planning on spending, unless you knew, of course. The other thing they love to do here is sneak in a little clause, and it's par for the course. They do it in Panama. I haven't seen it in other parts of the world, which is a construction escalation clause. We've talked about this in the past. It's basically like, hey, if my construction materials, I'm the developer now, if my construction materials went up, oh, by the way, your cost goes up too. Now you want to get that capped to 3, 4, 5% tops. But if you see a developer submitting a materials escalation clause for 10%, shoo-wee, alarm bells. Okay. The other thing is, now we're still talking developers buying pre-construction is don't expect to get your deed right away. Okay, so if you're counting on that for tax purposes or residency purposes or anything along those lines, you're going to want to use an instrument called an irrevocable letter of payment versus, okay, Mr. Developer, cool. You said you've got your CO, your certificate of occupancy. Well, then here's the balance. No. Make sure they don't get the balance until you are legally the owner of the property. Now, for those of you still potentially in a gray area where you've gotten the keys, you've paid the balance, but the deed hasn't been registered, there's nothing necessarily nefarious going on. It just means that the developer's already paid off their construction loan with your money and might be a little bit slow to get everything registered at the public registry, which also takes a while. Okay, so now let's talk existing properties. Number one, as you know, there are some industries that are generally kind of shady in the world, taxi drivers being one of them. And unfortunately, in Panama, real estate. We are not necessarily regulated by as articulate and honored code of ethics as somewhere in like the US, for example. So you get a lot of cases of people in the industry giving either deliberately fake or very loose information. For example, how old is the property? Agent might not know. Now, that's an easy one to verify, but obviously the age of the property is going to affect your taxes, right? Because there are certain exonerations in place based on when the buildings were developed or built delivered. The other thing that might be a little loose are leases. So lease pricing. So, okay, how much, if I buy this for that, then I'll be able to rent it for that. But these days, leases are very much negotiable. And let's be honest, the rental market is not firing right now, which means that if you're going to run your ROI numbers, make sure you do so with, for example, a little bit of a buffer, like 30 to 45 days of vacancy. And if your agent is saying, oh, we can list it at 2,000, you should probably plan on renting it around 1,800 ish. You know, if it's a Panama Equity agent, we're going to be straight on that and say, okay, listed at this, rented at this, expect to rent it out around this time. And obviously you work your numbers in there. Don't forget about commissions. Everybody loves to tell you how easy it is to buy real estate in Panama. And it kind of is, depending on where you're coming from. However, selling real estate, especially in a market that's not necessarily hot, takes longer than you were expecting and also costs a little bit more. For example, we charge 6%. Industry standard is anywhere from 4 to as much as 10% commission. And then you've got taxes. If you've got anybody telling you that you can avoid taxes, it is not the case. That is no longer an option in Panama to structure the deal such that, you know, the board of directors changes so that the asset conveys and none the wiser. No, that's very, very risky for the buyer. Seller, out. Seller's done. So you got to be careful about those kind of things. What else can I tell you guys? As far as research, we've got a lot of articles on pricing research out there, but, you know, there are multiple sources of information to get an idea on both comps, which are comparables. Yeah. So existing comps, but the challenge is sold comps. You know, as I understand, the U.S. is a lot more transparent. Panama is getting there. We do have an MLS. We do have a public registry. So that doesn't necessarily capture all of the deals, but it's a great starting point. For pre-construction, you've got reports produced by companies like ours, Galleria Inmobiliaria. Obviously, developers going to give you a price list, but you see that price list and like, oh my gosh, it's 80% sold. It's probably not. Those units, probably 20 or 30% of those units are being held until the end or being held by one guy who's like the developer's uncle who said he's going to buy them. And then they magically become available when it's time for the uncle to pay. So, you know, these things happen in Panama. I don't know if they happen in other parts of the world, but just stuff you need to be aware of. Knowledge is power. Caveat emptor here in Panama. Just align yourself with somebody you trust, whether it's us or somebody else that's awesome, that's got a strong reputation, that's not going to steer you down their path, but rather steer you down a path you need to be going on. Because, hey, what I want, what we want as a company, if you use us or not, awesome. But we want people having good experiences in Panama. So they go home and not just, oh my gosh, it's so pretty and awesome and fun and blah, blah, blah. But like, hey, I did a deal down there and everything kind of worked how I was expecting it to work. Well, now at least with this information, you've got a little bit more of a ability to manage expectations. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'm Kent Davis, Panama Equity Real Estate. Been around since 2007. Thanks.